Happy New Year, Chris. Hope you had a good break and coming recharged for the election.
Yes, I had a great break. It was excellent. But now back to work and notice to the grindstone. Yeah.
Thank you for accepting our NSW invitation to come and talk to us.
Yes.
We thought instead of doing one-to-one interview, we thought we'll have an audience. They come from different sections of the community so that we can have the interaction like what I had in Victoria. So this was my idea, that doing just one-to-one, it's better to have the whole community, a mixed bag here, so they can ask questions.
Yeah.
And you're a good orator. You'll be able to answer very well.
Well, it's a real privilege to be with this age in the community here in Sydney and New South Wales. I saw the interview with Dan Andrews, and it was incredible. I mean, it was a great opportunity for him to talk about Victoria. Of course, we're in the best state in Australia, right here in New South Wales, so we've got to reply.
You took the leadership when New South Wales Labour was not at the best, and you've turned it around. What did you do to achieve this?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think the first thing to note is that during the pandemic, I became leader during COVID, and Gladys Berejiklian was the Premier. And leaders of the opposition aren't supposed to say this, but I thought she was doing a very good job, a really good job in really difficult circumstances. So rather than play politics with the pandemic and the health response, I decided that we would support Gladys and try and get through the health. And then we can worry about politics later on. There's always time for politics, but that was a really important period. And then after that, I think the Labor Party is always best when it focuses on common sense issues, jobs, economic growth, opportunities and infrastructure for Western Sydney in particular, where a lot of our members are part. That's our job. And the Labor Party's been its best when we're focused on, it doesn't matter what your parents did for a living, you can do anything in Australia. That's a real legacy that generation after generation should hand to the next group of people. And so those bread and butter issues have really been the focus for New South Wales Labor, and they've been my focus too, and I'm really passionate about it. It's not necessarily glamorous, but it's so important, and if you get it wrong, you can't do anything else right.
Over the last 18 months, you and your team has been traveling to different parts of New South Wales.
Yeah.
You were listening and talking to the people. Now, you now say that you have a positive and a fresh plan.
Yes.
To resuscitate health and rebuilding the health workforce. This everyone has been talking for the last 3 decades. I've been listening to every politician, every party coming, talking about health, education, and improving on manufacturing.
Yes.
And these are 3 main key agenda you're talking about. So do you think there will be some drastic change in the health system as such, or in education as you're trying to recruit more teachers and retain more teachers, getting manufacturing back into New South Wales?
Yeah.
That's a big say, because I haven't seen anything happening in the last 3 decades. I've been living in New South Wales.
Of course. I appreciate that. And it's a funny thing, when you're in opposition, you can't prove that you'll fix it until you win government. So, in a sense, the people of New South Wales have to take it on trust. And I hope that over the next 2.5 months, voters in the state trust me, because it's a big job and a big responsibility. Let's talk about health first. The statistics are getting worse. So there's 66,000 people that walked into an emergency department. It was so overcrowded they didn't treatment at all over a 3-month period. It's the worst figure ever recorded, the second worst figure ever recorded. We've got 100,000 people on the elective surgery waiting list, including 4,000 children. And 1,000 of those 4,000 are waiting longer than the critical period that their doctors are recommending. They need to be seen urgently. So there are big challenges, but I think it's so important for any prospective premier or leader to listen to the people that work in those industries and those sectors. So I've spent a long time and a lot of time speaking to paramedics and nurses and doctors about what they need, to skill them up, to make sure the resources are in place so that we can turn around some of these statistics. You'll never hear from me, this is all the federal government's fault, or we're doing better than Victoria. We need a government that says there's a big problem here, it's going to require change, but we're going to take on that responsibility, and I think that's what New South Wales Labor.
If you call an triple O and want an ambulance, you may not get an ambulance in the next 45 minutes. That's the situation at the moment.
Yeah. Right, and we need to recruit paramedics, particularly for and we need to make sure that it's a thing called bed block. Has everyone heard of bed block? It's when the ambulance arrives at the hospital and the patient can't get out of the back of the ambulance because the emergency department's over capacity. And we're seeing a huge number of people, 1 in 10 are waiting longer than an hour in the back of an ambulance, which is one of the highest figures ever recorded. And that means that ambulance can't get back out to help people. And you're talking about people that have got strokes and cardiac arrests, heart attacks. They need to be seen in a short period of time. I'm not pretending these are easy problems. I think they're really difficult problems. But we're developing a plan that will make a massive difference. And, I think the New South Wales government that's been in for 12 years, asking for 16 years, they're very long in the tooth. And I think in many ways they're a bit tired and a bit sick of the challenge. So a fresh set of eyes is what we need.
This is the best opportunity for Labor in 12 years to make a comeback. How do you feel the party is in position to do that?
Well, we're very humble. I don't go into any election being overconfident because it's up to you, it's up to voters to make the decision. So I'm always humble about our prospects, but I'm really hungry. And we've got a young team, but they are really up for the challenge and they're working around the clock. The first phone call started at 5 o'clock in the morning. We're working till late into the evening. It's an exciting time for us, but we take absolutely nothing for granted. And to get that responsibility in March next year, what an honour, what a privilege. There's big problems in the state, but I think we've got the team in place to get something done.
Last year, your shadow minister for arts said that Mint's government will focus on events like Paramasada instead of award nights. Why have you taken this approach?
I think there's one of the big things about Sydney in particular is ballooning and for example, the Indian community in Western Sydney is responsible for some of the most dynamic and exciting parts of Sydney now. It's not just all about the harbour or the harbour bridge. And there are many families and tourists that would come to Australia and to come to New South Wales that would be really interested in this exciting event, particularly in Western Sydney, but they don't know about it. So I want to make sure that we're a government that looks at opportunities, particularly that are culturally different, to not just for the people that live in Sydney and in New South Wales, but to attract interstate visitors and people from overseas, because it's an exciting part of the New South Wales community, our multicultural community, and I don't think we shine enough of a spotlight on it.
You have extensive engagement with the multicultural communities.
Yeah.
Indian community being the second largest community in New South Wales.
Yes.
We are 700,000 people in Australia rightly. We have a strong force. What do you see is what special contribution done by us, and what is your experience with Indian community as such? South Asian, I can say. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm a Sydney boy. I grew up in the St George area. And as a Sydney boy, who's 43 years old, you grow up in multicultural communities. So my friends growing up right through sport, cricket, rugby, schooling, were people from Indian backgrounds, but we're all Australians, and that's one of the wonderful things about New South Wales and Australia. There is no Sydney and there is no Australia without the Indian community. It's a unique and intrinsic part of what's been created in Australia. And we are so proud of the contributions to academia, to business, to politics. More and more, we're seeing people with that cultural heritage rising to the highest positions, not just in politics, but inside the Labor Party. So my Shadow Treasurer, Daniel Mookie, has that background. So does the Deputy Leader, Prue Carr. So does our candidate for Winston Hill, Samir Pandy. So does our candidate for Liverpool, Charisma. We've got wonderful representatives from that community, but you would expect that. And we've got a team that is standing in March 2023 that I believe looks like the community that we want to represent. And that's, I think, an example of a political party that is looking at the broader community and saying, we look like you.
Now, in the federal, they have a good relationship with India.
Yeah.
How do you see your relationship of New South Wales Labor with India, especially with the states, larger states like Maharashtra and Gujarat and others? And we have a trade office in Bombay, in Mumbai.
Yeah.
Will you keep it open?
We have to keep it open, and we will definitely keep it open. The trading opportunities and economic growth associated with trade with India in particular are a big opportunity for the New South Wales economy. One of the underappreciated things is the 700,000 people with an Indian heritage are a big advantage for a country like Australia. It is an opportunity for us to, I don't want to say leverage because that sounds like it's an illegitimate thing to do. If we can fully realise the trading opportunities between the community that we have in Australia and the massive amounts of capital and opportunity that are in India, the sky is the limit for Australia. So we'll keep that office open. We'll make sure that trade and investment flows between Australia's largest state and India. I'm going to take a personal interest in it because it's crucial for the New South Wales economy that we are diverse and dynamic and we explore all opportunities for trade and growth. Our biggest export, New South Wales' biggest export is coal, and there's a future for that, and that's important that those trading opportunities remain. But we have to diversify our economy, and that means we want to be a trading economy that looks for opportunities around the world, and India is a big part of that jigsaw puzzle.
When I meet the people who do business here, they say doing business in India is very difficult.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, if you talk Australia, they say it's even more difficult to do business here.
Yeah.
And to get easy because we have Jindals, people who have invested in coal mines like Jindals and Adanis. They had a very bitter experience in Australia.
Yeah.
So people back home in India are a bit hesitant because it's not so difficult to invest in India at the moment, but they think investing in Australia is even more difficult.
Well, I mean, thinking about Australia, I'll take that point and I'll take it on notice. If you look at the distinction between the states, I'm constantly hearing it's easier to have investment opportunities and in particular approvals around developments in Queensland than in New South Wales. I think in some ways, because we're Australia's largest state, we take for granted that economic investment when we shouldn't and we can't. We have to be thinking about the future. It's a good opportunity to talk about the New South Wales economy. Our state is ranked last, according to the Commonwealth Bank, in terms of economic performance. The government has racked up $180 billion worth of gross debt, which will have to be paid off by future generations, and the deficit is the biggest that we've ever had in New South Wales. So, yes, economic growth is important and trade is important, but I don't think that the Liberal Party and the National Party's economic management has been strong. We need to do better in relation to that because that's a bill that we're just passing on to future generations.
Today you made a major announcement on stamp duty exemption.
Yes.
I would like to confirm your house's mouth, so exactly what it is.
So, first of all, the New South Wales government has a land tax on the family home plan. And they introduced it about 6 months ago. I don't support it. I've never supported land taxes on family homes. And the New South Wales Premier has said he'd like to see. Now, the reason I don't like it is because you have to pay off a yearly bill to the government based on the value of your property, but you pay it out of your wages. And we know over the last 10 years that asset prices and housing prices have doubled, but wages have remained flat or stagnant, and I'm concerned about young people's ability to pay the government every single year for as long as they have that house, forever. So we've decided to go down a different path. We'll use the money that we save from discontinuing the land tax on the family home proposal, and we will cut stamp duty for first home buyers. 95% of first home buyers will pay no stamp duty at all or a reduced amount under New South Wales Labor. We'll lift the thresholds from $650,000 to $800,000. So anything under $800,000, no stamp duty at all for a first home buyer. And if you purchase something for $850,000, at the moment you pay $30,000 in stamp duty. We'll knock that down to $10,000, which we think is important to get young people into the property market and make sure that we're doing something about cost of living. It's not a silver bullet, and it's not going to solve all of our cost of living pressures. I don't pretend that it will, but it's a start. I think it's a good direction for the state.
federally we have Labour. If in case New South Wales have a Labour government, do you think it will work more synergy? It will be better for the New South Wales people as such? Because back home they call it double engine government. If you have the same government in the centre, you have the same government in the state, it works very well.
Yeah. Well, we know each other, and obviously I've known Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, for a long time. So we've got an ease of conversation and communication, which I think is important because there are a lot of commonalities and cooperation that needs to take place between state and federal. So I hope that that happens. But I have to say, regardless of party, I'll stick up for New South Wales. And it's important that whoever gets elected New South Wales Premier is an advocate for this state. And wherever we can cooperate, we will. But wherever there's competition, I'm going to fight like a tiger for New South Wales.
Now we are asking the forum to ask. So please, anyone having a question, please introduce yourself and you can ask the question first.
I just want to anyone wants to ask a question, just wait for
Surinder Jain from Hindu Council of Australia. Thank you for this opportunity. I've got a few questions. Stop me anytime you think I'm going over time. My first question is end of life question, which concerns all South Asians. After cremation, ashes are spread in a river, and we have many rivers here, but we need a place where we can do it officially and legally. Is that something that you would be providing us?
Surinder, thank you for your question. So first I've heard of it, but absolutely. Obviously that's important in terms of cultural representation and mourning the passing of a loved one. I'd love to work with the Hindu Council and your organisation about making sure that we can do that in New South Wales. Obviously, it's crucial for the community.
Thank you for that. My next question is on what is being taught in state schools about India and Hindus. It's offensive to many of us. So if elected, would you be doing a revision of that syllabus so that not only Hindu religion, but any religion that is taught, students of that religion take pride in it and they admire others as well?
Well, look, I'm happy to tell you what the specifics that you're talking about. I mean, more generally, I think it's extremely important for people who have a cultural heritage or a family heritage with South Asia, India, or even China or other parts around the world that it's celebrated and accepted within the community. It's so important. It's one of the reasons why we're one of the only places in the whole world where you could be from any race or religion or ethnic background, but we live together, not just in tolerance of one another, but prosperity. And we have to hold on to that uniqueness. So that's a really important key for the state and something that I'll really be focusing on. Can I talk a little bit about education? Do you mind if I go on a tangent? This is important. Since 2006, our test scores for Year 9 kids have dropped, and they've dropped precipitously. We were in the top 10 for OECD countries in reading, maths and science in the mid-2000s. I'll tell you what it is in New South Wales now. We've dropped from 3rd to 23rd in relation to science amongst OECD countries. We've dropped from 6th to 23rd for reading, and we've dropped from 9th to 33rd when it comes to mathematics. These are precipitous declines, and we need to turn them around. We've got to understand that we're in a global competition. And it's not with the other states around Australia, it's with other jurisdictions throughout Asia. There is no more important investment we can make in terms of the economy or the budget or anything else than in our education system. And that means recruiting new teachers, it means investing in the curriculum, in our schools, in the infrastructure, because you get a massive return for every dollar that you put in. But if you don't put the money in, then you don't have the skilled labour or the young people meeting their full potential that you need in a country like Australia. So that's a big distinction, I believe, between what the government's proposing and what Labor's proposing.
I just request if we can keep the questions a bit.
Probably keep the answer short too.
We just want to get through everyone here.
Sure. Thanks, Chris, for mentioning the Indian community and the vibrancy of the festivals. You have been kind enough to attend our functions in Little India. The thing is that in spite of we struggling for this name, still, as you know, the area is not renamed as Little India. So can I take with you that if you are in the power, the first thing you'll be doing is inaugurating the Little India with us? Thank you.
I love the idea. I think it's a great device of attracting, I think, not just people from the Indian community that live in Australia, but every Australian. It could become a real centre point, a real landmark for tourism and investment in hospitality. What a fantastic idea.
But we are struggling for the naming still, as you're aware.
With me. Maybe that's something we can do straight after the
Wonderful.
It's great. Matt's making a mental note.
Chris, thank you for coming. And before I ask you a question, I should thank Rajesh and Meenu for their soft diplomacy. And we being Indian in origin, we have come in the heartland of China, in Nihabad, this meeting, and we welcome you here, Chris. So I think that's the example of soft diplomacy which India practices, and I congratulate both Meenu and Rajesh for that. Chris, there's one or two questions. I mean, people who don't know, Chris and I come from the same level, and Chris is our mother. And you know, the area of Kogra always produces the best in the world, and I wish you good luck for that, Chris. The second thing is, you know, the Indian numbers are growing in here since. When I first arrived 50 years ago, the numbers were, I think, probably about 70,000 or so. But now, as you know, the number has gone up to 700,000 or more, right? So, but when you look at aged care facilities for the Indian origin, see, it is way, way, way behind, right? We don't have one. It's non-existent, right? And I think I'm not putting any pressure on this one now, but it is good for the government to think, right, what they can do in this field, because a part of the population is just entering that stage where they need the grey area care of that, and it requires a lot of thought and thing. So that's one of the things. The second thing I require is the thing what we look at the medical facilities now, which is not only to the Indian ones, but it is for the whole community. This has got a community interest. And as a provider of primary care for past 50 years, and as a member who sat on the board of Southern Hospitals Board, and I think we have missing the point. I know it is between the state and the federal. I'm aware of that one. But the thing is, we have an established primary health care system in this country, and which is the best in the world. And we don't want to strengthen the primary care provider, but we go looking at other things, how to the other things. The reason is because the primary health care is going down. That's why the waiting list at the hospital is coming up. You mentioned some time ago the ambulance waiting there. And I totally agree with you. It's more frustrating when an ambulance comes there for half an hour to unload the patient in casualty. But how do you reduce that? And I raised this point in the board. And that is, we've got to strengthen the hands of the primary care provider. And this is something which the health ministers and as a leader, when you...
Absolutely. Let me get to it. First of all, your first point about Rajesh and Meena is absolutely right. They're a charming company and they've been very good to me, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
So these are the two. And
then in relation to health, look, a few things I'd say about it. Obviously, we've gone through a really challenging time when it comes to health policy in New South Wales and the entire world, because the COVID pandemic has really hit us all very hard. I was a little bit concerned about the Premier's response to suggestions around primary health care last week. Not in substance. I mean, there's not going to be a Premier of this state or any state, Labor or Liberal, that's not going to take more money from the Commonwealth. And putting in and investing it in primary health care, particularly GPs, is really important, because it used to be the case that the number of medical doctors that graduated and became MDs was about 50%. I think that number's dropped to the below 20% now. So clearly we need to turn that around. The only point I'd make is that this election can't be about the state government saying it's all the federal government's fault, and then the federal government saying it's all the state government's fault. Because I guarantee you, at the end of the polling day, nothing will change. And that's a long way of saying we can't let either me or Dominic Perrottet off the hook, because with 100,000 people on the waiting list, when you've got 1 in 10 that are waiting longer than 23 hours in an emergency department, and when New South Wales has actually dropped about 350 beds, at the same time as Queensland's increased their bed count by 1,200 over that same period of time, there's an investment that we need to make. I think we can do it efficiently by recruiting paramedics and nurses. I think we can do it by driving productivity in the sector. But buck passing is not going to fix anything. We've got a plan that will turn it around, and I'm confident it'll make change.
Can I raise this discussion sometime else? And I think there's a way around not putting pressure on either the federal or the state level. But the only way we can reduce the influx of patients and the casualty is not to bring them to the casualty.
Yeah.
And how do you prevent that happening is by looking after them as a primary healthcare provider system.
No question about it, yes. It's one of those jigsaw puzzles. You've got to get every bit interconnected. And if you let one bit drop down, then the whole system won't work.
Thank you.
Chris, sorry. Just expanding on the medical side, I'm a cardiologist and I'm working in the private sector and public sector. We are exhausted, completely exhausted, you know. At the end of the day, we don't care where the money comes from, whether it's public, whether it's state, whether it's federal. It doesn't concern us whatsoever. The pressure we are under is that, you know, patients turn up to accident and emergency. The reason for that is they don't want to pay a gap. Physician. I mean, they're getting paid $39 GPs. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, seeing someone on a Sunday for $39 is madness, complete madness. You know, you call a plumber out, you know, they charge you $500 just for a call out. So the patients don't want to go to the GP. They front up to accident and emergency.
Yes.
The people in accident and emergency are junior doctors. They don't want to take any legal responsibilities. So they come in with a sore throat, they admit them. And then you get the bed blocks. You know, you're talking about bed blocks. You can't get patients in up to the wards. You can't get to the wards. Theatre lists get cancelled because there's no beds in there.
Yeah.
You know, I think this concept of bulk billing has to stop. Somewhere along the line, it has to stop. I know there are people struggling out there, but there has to be a co-payment to GPs. You know, whether it's $5, $10, there has to be a nominal payment so that they appreciate that service. And that's the only way. And you know, we have to encourage these patients to go to the general practitioner. No one wants to do general practice now, and everyone who goes into medical school, but 50% of people want to do practice. The rest of them want to get into specialist training.
No. And first of all, thank you for your hard work. I'm
Yeah.
sure exhausted and the work that you do out there.
I'm late now because I was fixing up some heart attack. You know, so.
But let me try and answer your question. You're absolutely right. And the point I'm making is, obviously, in relation to primary healthcare, that's a federal government responsibility, and we would take, in every instance, seriously if they were proposing to go down a pathway of reform in relation to primary healthcare. The only point I make about the New South Wales election and the decisions that Dominic Perrottet and I have to make is that we need to get into the nitty-gritty of the New South Wales hospital system, because my concern is that we'll get through to polling day, the state and the federal government both point guns at each other, and we'll miss an opportunity to reform at the state level. I've got a situation in Blacktown Hospital where 30 nurses have quit since Christmas 2020. And these were nurses being lured away either by the private sector, nursing homes, aged retirement centres, or they're just leaving the profession altogether. And you'd know, sir, that nurses that are experienced and practiced in an emergency department with decades worth of experience save time. They're extremely productive because they can walk in and say, that's a potential stroke, that could be a cardiac arrest, you look like you're in trouble, you can wait, sir. We have to turn it around at the state level within our public hospitals. It's one of the reasons why we've agreed to safe staffing levels for our nurses. We're also going to recruit an additional 500 paramedics just for regional New South Wales, because the number of ambulances and paramedics attending emergency departments is blown out by massive numbers. And this isn't me saying that the federal government doesn't need to do something about primary care. They do. But we can't pass the buck in terms of the New South Wales election, because you know, sir, elections are a great opportunity to hold politicians to account. And if we don't reverse some of the cuts that have been made in health, well, the government gets re-elected, nothing will change. But I sincerely mean it. I was told that you were late tonight because you're working. And I can only imagine the hours and effort and stress and anxiety that you put in.
I mean, I'm a cardiologist. All of a sudden, the hospital will come and say, guys, we're having all this COVID influx. So you now have to cover COVID wards.
Yeah.
I'm not a COVID doctor. I can give advice, and I'm doing the patient a disservice by looking after COVID patients. My registrars, away for 2 weeks, the hospital doesn't replace them. So the junior staff keeps ringing me. Now, I'm not sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I'm looking after patients, So.
Lovely to meet you.
Great.
Doctor.
I just need to get
Thank
ready.
you.
Who else wants to ask questions? We just have to keep it short.
We have another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I just need
Because we want to wrap it up by 6.
And then I'll get on to it. Don't worry, I'm going to make sure we get to everyone, but we just need to keep it.
I'm a lawyer. I'm into consultancy advice on trade and investment. I hear that the Trade Commissioner in Mumbai has resigned, and I'm heartened to hear that you will keep that office open going to the future. I'm also heartened to hear that you are taking personal interest. There's a lot of opportunity between Australia and India. We all know that. But I just feel that at the state level, it's been missing. You need the government involved and leading appropriate delegation, not delegations of 100 people, which is just a namesake. We've gone out there, tick the box and come back. There has to be serious, proper delegation, right people selected to go and represent the state. There's a real opportunity for the state to bring in younger Indians. 65% of Indians are aged under 35. Utilise that, educate them here, the Australian way, and then bring them into the workforce. State with that kind of knowledge has a lot to gain, and we need to create manufacturing and other areas need to develop in the state. So I was just wanting to hear a bit more about if you've got any ideas around that and what will be the plans going to the future.
Yeah, great question. There's a few things in that. Firstly, it's really important that as the leader of New South Wales Labor, I want to tell you that we believe in multiculturalism and we believe in immigration into Australia. The stories that have been started, family stories, business stories, connections, communities that have been created because people took a chance to get on a plane and start a new life in the other side of the world is now part and parcel of the DNA of our country. And it's really important that you know that there's unambiguous support for that from New South Wales Labor. We are seeing a massive decline in the number of students that are coming here to study, as well as backpackers that spend a limited amount of time within New South Wales and Australia and then leave and go back to their home countries. And we're one of the few countries around the world that's actually encouraged that kind of immigration in the medium term for university study or short-term working holidays. Most countries around the world don't allow you to work and travel. We've seen, I think, a 60 or 70% reduction in that in the last 2 years. After COVID, many people didn't come back. So we need to make sure that unambiguously people know that Australia is open for business, that we are a warm, welcoming economy and society, that we want people to come here. I'm a little bit concerned that after the doors closed for COVID, many people were unable to leave and weren't given support if they stayed. And that sent a bad message to our neighbours and friends in other countries. I'm convinced that we can turn that around, but we've got to start. Second point in relation to the Trade and Investment Commission, I don't expect you to believe that I'm an expert in relation to this particular form of commerce, and I'm not. But my understanding is that it is based on personal relationships and deep cultural ties. And the point I want to make about the 700,000 people who are Australians that have Indian culture is we can use it. We can use it for family, community, and business links to supercharge that investment potential in New South Wales. And that might be inbound foreign investment into this country. I bet you there's wonderful goods and services that are just looking for markets in places like India that I'd love to see exploited as well. So I'm optimistic about the future because I look at the population in Australia. We've got skilled, educated, safe country with property rights and democracy where the sky's the limit and you can realise your potential. There's not many countries around the world that can claim that, but we can here.
Chris, the Indian division, the government here at the state of New South Wales, there's about 2 or 3 people involved. In Victoria, there's over 60.
Yeah, I know.
And that, Victoria's just laughing. And we're just leaving. We can't rely on the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge to bring in investment and tourists. We've got to work hard towards, and that's a division that I really hope you will look at and increase the numbers and, be a reckoning.
Thank you.
Okay, hi Chris, very good evening. My name is Ahalya and by profession I'm an engineer, and besides I'm a very active community worker, and currently I'm a secretary of the Rotary Club and on the advisory committees of Blacktown City Council and work closely with them. Oh yeah, still busy. Well, so my first question is with respect to the gambling industry. So with respect, so if you look at the latest records, the New South Wales Liquor and Gaming Authority, they have stated that there's no visibility of money pouring through star poker machines, especially the cash transitions. And I'm sure everyone is aware how serious this issue is with respect to money laundering, which affects the economy growth. So my question is, what is the new take, like all the alternatives that the new government is coming up to control the cash transitions? Yeah, with respect to this, the gambling industry, so that at least everyone will have a clear record of what's happening in and around.
Great question. There's a few things I need to talk about in terms of this industry. Firstly, the current government that's been in for 12 years, they're asking for 16 years. Over that period of time, they introduced a second casino into New South Wales at Crown, down at Barangaroo.
Yes.
They dismantled the Office of Liquor and Racing and Gaming, which were the to make sure that people were complying with the laws and the rules and regulations. Problem gambling has doubled over that period of time, over that period of time. And online gambling increased by 30 or 35% during the COVID-19 pandemic, which meant there was a substitution effect from gambling on poker machines to online betting. And I think if you watch cricket or you watch the World Cup, every time you turned on that television, there was a gambling ad. Gambling after the other, over and over again, which I think in many ways as a parent, I've got 3 boys, I'm concerned that they're interested in sport, but they're talking to me about gambling. Poker machines is part of that as well. And there's a proposal on the table to move to cashless gaming for poker machines. Now, we're not against it, but we have said we want to make sure that there's a trial in place so that we don't make a bad situation worse. And what I mean by that is, in New South Wales, it's illegal to gamble with a credit card. You have to use cash. The reason for that is so the gambler knows how much he or she is losing through the poker machine. I'm worried, and I don't know the answer to this because this technology doesn't exist anywhere in the world. I'm worried if we just go to 100% cashless, then it could increase the amount of problem gambling because the gambler doesn't know how much they're losing. So we're proposing a trial. City, country, clubs, pubs, comprehensive across the board. We'll collect the information, and if it says it'll make a big impact or an impact in relation to problem gambling, we'll do it. Because I want to make sure that we see change in relation to this. And we're inheriting, in my view, a troubling and bad situation from Dominic Perrottet and the Liberal Party.
And also a quick question, sorry, and a small request. So, housing affordability. I come from Blacktown City Council. Okay, right now, with the first home buyers, it's a very good policy implementation. But when coming to housing affordability, if you look, because of the inflation, the rents are increasing and many people are unable to afford, which is pushing out to be homeless, right? I know it's between, again, federal and state level, Okay, so I know that in 2008 that Rudd government has proposed the rental property plan, and now again the Labour government is trying hard to put it back again. So till then, what are the solutions? Solution is a big word, but what are the alternates? So that the people who can't afford the rental properties, who are still struggling to pay and they're pushed out, what is the alternate for them to survive?
Great question. Housing affordability and the cost of living crisis. I think if I came to all of you and I said, I've got one idea that's going to solve all of these things, you'd say, that's ridiculous. And I don't. But I do have 3 initiatives that we think will make a big difference. Firstly, there's 2 million renters in New South Wales. We're going to make sure that it's illegal to have secret rent bidding. What I mean by that is, when someone goes to a rental property, if they advertise for $800, but I go along and I say, I want to offer you $850 or $900, then the owner of the property has to notify everyone else who put in an application at the same time. So you're not incentivised to go immediately for that unit and offer an extra $100 a week. We think that'll put downward pressure for renters. Number 2, as I said earlier, we're going to increase the threshold for stamp duty exemptions from $650,000 to $800,000 with the reduced amount up to $1 million. And the last thing, and I think this is really important for a city like Sydney, and that is I think that we need to examine where we're building homes, particularly in metropolitan Sydney. If you look at growth plans for Sydney, the government is planning on an additional, this is more people, 127,000 for Parramatta, 100,000 for Blacktown, and 110,000 for the Hills. But the CBD is only going to grow by 30,000, Northern Beaches by 25,000, and Mossman by 800. No, it's even less than that. It's about 500. So we need to make sure that we're balanced and we're building stock and supply where people live, and that's along transport routes. So if we're building metro lines, we're going to ask the Greater Cities Commission to examine whether we can put more density on those transport lines so people can live and work where jobs and opportunities are. We can't just keep adding another street to the western fringe of Sydney, because eventually we're just going to be spread out of too big a plain, too big an area, and it's too hard to put the infrastructure in place to grow sustainably. So there are 3 initiatives I think are going to help. We've thought, I hope I'm not going on, but we've really thought deeply about these things. We think we can make a change, and they're not easy things to do, but this will make a difference.
My name is Praful Desai, Council of India. This is about the new policy launched for the first home buyers. Now, the cap for the stamp duty is, 1 million, but as Liberals' policy is up to 1.5 million. Do you think a lot of people will miss out for that? And it's a negative on the policy part?
So it's really important that everybody know that 95% of first home buyers purchase a property for less than $1 million in New South Wales. Less than $1 million. So our policy is targeted to them, the 95%. The median house price in Sydney is about $1 million. The median house price in the regions is about $630,000. So 95% will benefit under Labor's plan. I'll give you an example. $830,000 property, you pay $30,000 at the moment, you pay $10,000 under us. But I have to tell you, sir, that even if you purchase a property under the Liberals' plan for $1.2 million, based on net present value, you'll pay the New South Wales government $70,000 in property taxes over 30 years that you own that property. And this is not a well-known part of their plan, but if you purchase that property and want to treat it as an investment property, which a lot of people do that, first home, they move out and they keep it as an investment, then you pay property taxes and land taxes. So your annual bill goes from $2,000 to $8,000 a year under Dominic Perrottet's plan. Now, I'd much rather people pay no stamp duty or a reduced amount rather than go to a brand new land tax for family homes in New South Wales. So I don't think he's put the thought into it. I think it's a plan that many families will choose, but then they're going to have to pay that land tax on the family home for as long as they have that property. Forever if they have it forever. So I think we need to look at it in a fresh way. The other point about it, I'll go on about it, but I think this is important. Dominic Perrottet would say, well, if you don't want to pay the annual land tax, sell the property. But if this regime was in place in 2022 and a first home buyer said, I'm going to have to sell it in 2023, well, housing prices have dropped 12% in the last 12 months. So all of a sudden there'll be a negative equity as a result of these tax changes. And that creates a whole bunch of distortions in the tax system. I know he's selling it as reform. I don't think he's put the thought into it. And I don't think it's in the interest of the economy or a lot of young people that live in New South Wales. But it's a considered question. Thank you.
Can we have the last question, and then after that we can interact with him?
I just have different, take on this whole question thing. I'm a restaurateur by profession, and my name is Shekhar Mani. The question is, we've been pioneers in terms of innovation, taking into account what the pandemic brought into the diaspora. We've been bringing about technology in order for us to get more efficient. Is there a way in which the government can subsidize that transformative technology being adopted by high-end restaurants or the average hospitality industry? That would be very convenient for, especially given the fact that last 3 or 2 years we've had a hell of a downturn. Or would that be part of your portfolio in terms of looking after the restaurant and catering associations? Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Is particularly in relation to different ways of distributing food and hospitality services in New South Wales. We've got technology rapidly arriving, but it doesn't seem like we're keeping pace with the distribution of that. I mean, can I speak more generally about entrepreneurship and innovation? We don't do it well in New South Wales. We've got some of the best research universities in the world. We've got a highly educated, stable, democratic culture and economy. We're growing, but we're not investing in those value-add industries or those new technologies. And you talk about trade and investment, not just with India, but with Singapore and mainland China and Hong Kong. A lot of it is about inbound investment, but that kind of technology, that technological change and that innovation, that value add from a services economy is not coming through. So I think we can do a better job in relation to that. A lot of it comes down to innovation, but if there's subsidies and programs that we can put in place to be a world leader, we're happy to look at that too.
Thank you.
Okay, last one, please.
Okay, thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Chris, for making the time to come here. My name is Sunil Vyas. I'm a GP and also of the United Indian Associations. I wanted to, first of all, endorse what Dr. Harina said, that there's a crying need for culturally appropriate care for the elderly, and that a need will continue to increase in coming years. So if you're elected, it's going to come into your, it will be a big responsibility for you. So please look into that seriously. Just on a more positive note, I would like to add that we Indians, unabashedly, I'll say we are talented, very hardworking, and make every possible contribution to the nation that we've chosen to live in. And we love Australia. I want to ask you, what plans or thoughts have you got to harness our energies to enhance our India-Australia relationship? I know that falls into federal territory, but there's no reason why state-wise, with New South Wales being such a big, eminent state, could do so. And that alludes to what you said earlier about the education, how we've fallen in the OECD rankings as well. I'm thinking of how we can build up from New South Wales with different states, build up relationships culturally, but also educationally, maybe business-wise as well. So, what?
3 words that I took from your question. Harness the energy. That's perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. You've got this massive diaspora in New South Wales of Indian heritage. You're right. I mean, I hate to speak stereotypes, but it's a stereotype. It's true. Hardworking, diligent, extremely resourceful, building communities and businesses, excelling in academia. There's no question this country has absolutely benefited from waves of emigration from India to Australia's benefit. We're so happy that you're here. The next step is harnessing the energy. And I think that if I could steal your question and apply it to a government that I could potentially lead, I think that the sources of economic growth and opportunity would be endless. And I love the spirit in which the question was asked. I think there's massive opportunities for this state in New South Wales, and We've got to be open to it. Look, I mean, you'd expect me to say this. I'm a politician. There's 2 months to go before the state election. But the current government's been in for 12 years. They're asking for 16 years in power. You have to be a very, very good government to be in power for 16 years. In my view, their best days are behind them. And many of their best people have either resigned or are resigning. There's 26 resignations or not contesting the next election since March 2019. They're a completely different group of people than the group that you elected in 2019. So my humble pitch to you is it's time for change in New South Wales, to get a group of people that are refreshed and excited about the future and can look at these problems in a new way. Because I think that's what the state of New South Wales needs.
Thank you. We just have one last question, all the way from India. Actually, this is how great Rajesh and Minu are with their reach and building so much interest in this event. I really want to thank Rajesh and Minuji as well. Please, big round of applause. Back here, but this is from Shiva Nankyolgar, and she's in India at the moment. She's Chair of Women in Business at AIBC, Australia Indian Business Council, and she's actually keen to hear your views on how global mobility can assist in nation building, and how can the diaspora play a stronger role in this future.
Well, I think that's sort of the recognition that the world's changing, the borders are collapsing, and that people can travel around the world and experience life and commerce and opportunities in the four corners of the world, which is a good thing, and it's an important part of what it means to live in a modern society. I think Australia is at the cutting edge in many ways of that modern society, but the job's not done, and I'd like to see an economy and an economy that's at the cutting edge of science and technology that harnesses the potential of the people that we're educating through our schools and our universities, and has a real focus on the future. Now, I've mentioned a few stats and figures over the last hour about the performance of different governments, but I'm a pretty positive person. I'm very optimistic about the future, and my orientation is all about what's down the line, what's coming next, because we can't do much about the past. We can learn from it, but the focus has to be about the future. So the potential, the opportunities for New South Wales are limitless, but we need a government that gets on with it and thinks about those potentials.
Thank you, Chris, for your time.
You bet.
Thank you for coming.
Australia's first Indian magazine to have a national reach, Indus Age is the largest circulated South Asian magazine in Australia with 5 simultaneous editions, 55,000 copies printed monthly, 220,000 readers, largest network of clients, undisputed leader in community news. Indus Age is circulated in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane and Perth to over 525 outlets. Grab your copy now to get the latest on the community, news from India, Bollywood, music and much more. For more info, log on to www.indusage.com.au.